Hey, this is Keith from 3-Day RV, and welcome back to the channel. This week's video is going to take a little bit longer than normal to put together because it's a little more complex. What that is we're putting in a new MORryde suspension along with a new axle on our RV. So hang with us while we take this thing apart. We'll show you step by step what we had to do, but we'll speed the video up so it doesn't put you to sleep. So we have a 2022, it's a Coachman Freedom Express that had a bent axle. I'll try to put a link in the description to show you the short where I repaired that axle on the road with a couple of hydraulic jacks. And it's straight for the most part. It looks pretty good, but we know it's not right. And then if you hit the wrong hole again, it's going to be like a metal coat hanger, right? It's potentially going to get worse real fast. So we're going to show you the parts, and we're going to show you what it takes to not only slide a new axle underneath this camper, but to completely change the OEM suspension, which looks like this stuff down here. So we'll be changing all of this out. We even got the bar that goes from side to side to help make it a little more rigid, a little more stout, and we'll show you what this takes. It's going to be a little bit involved, but it's not going to be bad. The axle you're looking at, that's the one that's bent. So hang in there, and we'll try not to put you too far asleep, and we'll show you how this goes. So thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. This is the replacement axle that I ordered from Dexter. It's the exact replacement with the upgraded leaf springs. Most of you know out there that some of those leaf springs during COVID, this is the 22, so I'm not saying anything bad about any of the manufacturers, but some of the parts they use were a little, call it what it is, less than great. So this axle has the upgraded leaf springs, and I ordered, so that's the bad axle coming off. This is the one that's going on. Okay, but the front axle on the camper is okay, but it also has a little less than desired leaf springs. So I ordered the two new springs that match these, and we'll swap those out too. The UPS guy is supposed to be here with them today, and if he's not, well, we'll survive. So anyway, we're going to take this thing apart. We got some cinder blocks, and we're going to properly jack this thing up off the ground. I definitely want to break all my lugs loose first, but we want to jack it off the ground. I got cinder blocks to put underneath it, and I'm going to raise the camper about 6 inches over its ride height right now. And I'll individually get each tire off. And while the tires are off, we're going to be upgrading the wheel sensors that are in there. I do have the TST wheel sensors, the hub band type that mounts to the rim, and it reports pressure and temperature, and they do work good. But I'm going to try the General Motors sensors so that I can hook it up to my 2020 Denali that's got the Pro trailer package on it. So right on the dashboard, it's going to tell me pressure and sensors, temperature, and hopefully that'll be one less little gadget on the dashboard going down the road. I'm not crazy about all those, a little monitor for this, a monitor for that, and so hopefully it'll be a little safer too. But the parts that the great people at MORryde sent us, they're upgrades. Obviously, we got wet bolts. You can see the bolts in the bag. It's got the grease fittings on the end. These are the brackets, and this is this piece that goes from side to side called the Crossmember, the Xfactor Crossmember. And as you can see on that paper, it stiffens that up. It gives it a little more rigidity. And this is the shackle kit, I believe it's called. Yeah, and you can see that these are definitely the upgrades. Wet bolts, looks like bronze bushings. This is the CRE3000 suspension, and I have this particular rig has about 14 inches center line or so, 14 and a half between the bolt to bolt. So you got to know which one you're getting before you click that purchase on the website. You want to make sure you get the right parts, make sure you got the right span. So that's what we got going on here. At the time of this video, we were right at the end of August, and I don't have to tell you, you can see It's hot and muggy out here, and we have this new thing going on in the Midwest that I've never heard in my whole life. I've lived here, born here. People are calling it corn sweat. What the heck, you know? Corn sweat. All right, whatever. So anyway, stay tuned. Let's get this thing all ripped apart. Okay, that took a few minutes, but now that we got all four corners of the RV sitting up on cinder blocks, now we're going to take that rear axle off. I don't have to worry about it moving now. And overall, we're 2 inches higher than ride height, which is going to take some pressure off the springs. And I'm going to jack up each side individually, take the tires off, and then all the good stuff starts. Did I mention it was hot? So to make this a little bit easier, I went around to every one of the leaf spring shackle bolts. They call them the U-bolts. Went around and took all the rust and debris and dirt off the threads, and then I shot them down with a little bit of penetrating oil to make these things come apart real easy. Some people use a torch, blow these bolts off. I choose not to do that, especially on the asphalt. A little preparation goes a long ways, and it'll make things come apart without beating yourself all up. And that was just the case here. This thing come apart real easy, and it went together real easy, as you'll see. But the new axle I ordered from Dexter was an exact drop-in replacement, and this is where we found some issues. Look how sloppy and loose the plastic bushings are on the OEM kits. It's absolutely ridiculous. Some of the play that we were experiencing was because a fairly new suspension, the bushings were completely, totally shot. All right, so I got just enough height off that the spring is unloaded. It's like having an extra set of hands. That's sitting in a perfect spot. So we're going to go ahead and pull all this hardware off on this side while we're here. Doesn't make any sense not to. Alright. Then we'll put the wrench on it. Plug your ears, folks. It's going to get loud. I'll give you a chance to turn your volume down. Here we go. Okay, so there's a shackle that we're not going to reuse. Man, look at how sloppy these bushings are. Man, oh man. See, and this will give you, a little extra tire wear with this thing being worn out like this. Plastic bushings from the factory, I mean, come on. We can do better. Hopefully the industry sees this. They certainly can do better than this. Come on, plastic. All right. Even these plastic bushings are worn out. Then I got to press these out. Got to get that bushing totally out of there for the new MORryde bushings to go in place. Which, by the way, they're brass. No wonder the MORryde stuff is rated so good. In case you're wondering, it's a copper hammer. Alright, so there's that piece with another worn out plastic bushing. Can you see that? Grief. So now I told you this was some heavy-duty hardware here. This thing is not super light. Okay. Fits pretty good. I'm just going to slip this nut in there on the back side to hold it. Again, there's a bracket that goes on here before it's all said and done. And now the front shackle, which is just laying on there. You know, I got a mechanics creeper in there and I never remember to bring it out. Alright, so this will tilt quite a ways forward. Okay, almost made a mistake. These Zerg fittings are supposed to go from the back side. So these Zerg fittings that you're looking at here, these are to go on the inside. Leaf spring is a little bit twisted up there because that's how it's sitting. It's not sitting too happy. Okay, get these other parts out of the way. And we'll put that big shackle bracket on.
So it's obvious, everything on the camper, you know, it's got a left and a right side. So everything I did to one side, I would go immediately over to the other side and complete that and go back and forth. I'm not going to show everything on the video because you will get it. But let's pick up on the new axle here. I put it on casters that I got from Harbor Freight to make it easy to roll in. And once again, everything lined up perfectly, and it made me very skeptical because sometimes when things go too easy, there's something that you forgot. But this wasn't the case. Everything lined up perfectly. Everything bolted up as it was intended to be. So, you know, my hat's off to the MORryde team because they build a really good product here.
So here we are on the next part, putting the X-Factor Crossmembers on. This is the outer, and this is what's going to bolt up to that very first bracket we put on. So the outer one goes first, and if you have a helper to hold this up, that's good. I don't. I've got a couple of little milk crates I'm going to use to hold this up until I can get all the bolts started and get the second one in. Okay, so we've already gotten that hardware on the sides and the big bolt. All that stuff is tight on both sides, and the only thing left is to tighten and torque these bolts here. So we will get that straightened out and tighten these down. I apologize for the wind, but just in case I missed it, these are the typical bushings you get when you order a new set of leaf springs. Doesn't matter who you get them from, they typically just send them with what I believe is a polypropylene or a polyurethane. These are the ones you get from MORryde. They go along with the wet bolts. And for those of you who've never seen what a wet bolt is, or you're hearing it for the first time, that's just a drilled passageway, so when you grease it, the grease has a place to go and come out and fill around this bushing. So as long as that grease gets around this bushing, your suspension's gonna travel more freely, okay? So in order for this to work right, I could put them in there with the plastic bushings. They're not meant to be though, and I want this to last. So I have to drive this little plastic bushing out, which is not hard to do, but I have to drive this bushing out. And if I get that bushing out of the way, then I'm going to be able to press this in. And so it's not hard to do, especially on a new one like this. I got an old sacrificial socket. This one is a 1/2-inch drive, 3/8 flea market socket. So if I tear it up, I'm not going to cry. But these tap right out, as you can see. Okay, you just tap them a little ways and that comes out. My socket, unfortunately, wants to hang a little bit, but that's the brand new bushing, okay? You can see this, I hope. That's the brand new bushing. Looks pretty, doesn't it? This is the bushing that's, let's call it 3 years old, because that rig is a 2022 Coachman, and this bushing was put in it at the factory somewhere, and you can see how the rust got in here. So this thing, it's got a flat spot where something, it looks like the bolt perhaps was in there just with no lubrication, just grinding away at the bushing. So this is one of the things that's really cool about the brass upgrade, okay? Now some of these you can very simply, and I mean very simply, very easily, you can tap these, pardon the helicopter, you guys see that? I don't know, we're getting an invasion. Could be the RV nerd. And you just very gently tap those down in there, and you just repeat that process.
So I wanted to take a minute to show you how easy it is to change a leaf spring. Once you get all the rust off the bolts and use a little penetrating oil, if you've got that vehicle suspended properly with jack stands and you use a small jack like I am, you can take the load off these springs, and it's very simple to change these leaf springs out. There are a lot of leaf springs out on the market that are flattened, so take a minute and check yours out before your trips. So this was probably the most difficult part, only because I was putting this on by myself. But with the use of a crate, I was able to steady this up and get the bolts in. But once you get one started, you start plugging the holes as you go across from side to side. But a special note, as I mentioned earlier, don't tighten anything up until you get the end. So this is a quick view of the progress where we got our new axle in. We got our X-Factor cross bars that go across. Got them all on all three places. We're still sitting jacked up, but tomorrow's a final torque to make sure everything has been gone over twice. And it's time for a test drive.
All right, we got all this stuff on there finally. It's time to put a little grease to them. All the wet bolts. And there we go. Got a little grease come out around the edges. You can hear it too. Makes a good kind of a squirt sound when it's full. So we're going to grease it all the way around. It takes about 3 pumps, and you see it come out. Plus it stiffens up. All right, and the grease we're using is that that's that red grease I get from O'Reilly's. I think it's an NGL2, something like that. It's a good wheel bearing grease. What I use on the spindles. Red and tacky, that's what it was called. So we'll go grease the other side.
So even though we were using the GoPros underneath this rig, they have that video stabilization, so it doesn't do this road justice because it is a country road. It's a county road. You know the type with the little swells and potholes. But the one thing I noticed right away with the suspension was I didn't notice the trailer kind of swaying a little bit from side to side, just a teeny tiny bit of play that was a result of those plastic bushings being worn out. So right away, this is a huge upgrade because it is straight as a bullet going down the road. And obviously, I was only doing about 50 miles an hour on this country road on my way to the highway. But here shortly, we'll be on the highway, and we ran it right up to 65, and it was a slight cross breeze hitting us, but there's a huge improvement in how this trailer tracked behind us, and I attribute that to those bronze bushings and the suspension that's very free moving now because of the grease. So when I first started researching this X-Factor Crossmembers, I wasn't sure exactly what these did, how many I would need. Really, were they necessary at all? But the more I read, the more convinced I was that we had to have these. Basically, it bolts your two suspension points from side to side so that when you're turning, or if the rig is under a pretty extreme load while turning, it makes the suspension on both sides work together. So it's kind of tying left to right. That's a noticeable thing when I was making my turns. Many of you may have noticed when you're making kind of a tight turn that you'll look in the mirrors and you'll see how those tandem axles kind of slide left to right. It looks kind of sickening when you're turning. This prevents you from breaking or busting the brackets that your shackle bolt to. So you won't necessarily rip welds loose with these, or it will severely limit that from happening. So it's a necessity to have these. I just can't see going forward without them. So thanks for hanging in there to the very end. In the description, we're going to put a link to all the products here, as well as a discount code that you can use and save a few bucks on one of these kits. But overall, I would rate this maybe a 4 out of a 10 level of difficulty to install. Do you think it would make it a lot easier obviously if I had a hoist to put the unit on, but I don't. And I had to get some extra blocks to set it up to make it safe. But other than that, it was straightforward. Everything lined up perfectly as it should. We expected that. And towing down the road, as you probably saw on the footage just a minute ago, this thing is definitely smoother. So very happy to be working with MORryde on this, and hopefully we can get some more stuff in the future. So thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the like and share, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.